delivering quality education, expanding access to learning. The official TV-based instruction of Tagum City. This is Tagum City Division's DepEd TV. Tara na!
It's communication time again for all the senior high learners. Welcome! As Lantaw Compre, our school on air through television, gives you a new and another significant learning session. This is the television-based instruction of DepEd Division of Tagum City. I am Crizal and Britannia from Tagum City National Comprehensive High School, your teacher for today. Join me in perceiving the words of the world and knowing how communication works among people to foster mutual understanding and good relationship. In your previous lesson, you have learned about the models of communication. You were taught in the different elements of communication that work together to achieve a successful communication transaction. For a better and broader understanding of today's topic, let us check first your prior knowledge by answering what I know on page 1 to 2. Choose the letter of the best answer. Write your answers on a separate sheet of paper. You will be given 5 seconds to answer each item. Are you ready? Let's begin! Question number 1. It happens when the sender fails to communicate his or her message properly, or when the intended message is not clearly understood by the receiver. A. Communication. B. Communication barrier. C. Strategies to avoid communication barriers. Or letter D. Process of communication. The correct answer is letter B. Question number 2. It refers to the natural or environmental conditions that hinder a successful communication transaction. Letter A. Cultural barrier. Letter B. External noise. Letter C. Physical barrier. Or letter D. Psychological barrier. The correct answer is letter C. Question number 3. These are issues like trauma, lack of confidence, fear, anger, frustration, and depression that may affect the communication process. Letter A. External noise. Letter B. Linguistic barrier. Letter C. Psychological barrier. Or letter D. Semantic noise. The correct answer is letter C. Question number 4. It refers to the way a person responds in a communication situation affected by personal norms and traditions. Letter A. Cultural barrier. Letter B. Linguistic barrier. Letter C. Physical barrier. Or letter D. Psychological barrier. The correct answer is letter A. Question number 5. This is an example when linguistic barrier to communication becomes evident. Letter A. A professor explains his lessons eloquently in class. Letter B. Elena is afraid to deliver her opening remarks. Letter C. People do not understand each other's language. Or letter D. The transmitter disrupted the speech of his speaker. The correct answer is letter C. That's it! Were you able to get the correct answer? I hope you did. This time, you will be given a clear direction for today's lesson with our objectives. At the end of our session, you are expected to first, define the concept of communication breakdown. Second, identify the different kinds of barriers to effective communication. Third, explain the causes of communication breakdown. And fourth, use appropriate strategies to avoid communication breakdown and achieve the goals of relationship and community building. Now, let's keep on talking. Communication is a process of exchanging thoughts, ideas, and opinions in order to connect with other people. Its goal is to achieve a clear and effective understanding resulting to good relationship in the community. However, there are times when this goal is not achieved due to certain factors. When this happens, there is communication breakdown. Try to think what could possibly be the reason for those times that we fail to understand each other. It is because you are just too busy, or maybe the world is just too tied up of everything. Observe the following situations and write down your own explanation. The elements involved in communication are important in the success or failure of this process. These very same elements, the sender, message, receiver, feedback, and etc., can pose a threat to the efficiency or effectiveness of the process. Communication breakdown may occur when problems in any of the elements involved arise. They become barriers to communication. Simply put, communication breakdown results when the intended message of the sender is not understood exactly by the receiver. Barriers to communication are present. Thus, recognizing the barriers or obstacles to effective communication is important in order to avoid communication breakdown. Let's cross over what are these barriers of communication that may cause communication failure. First, physical barriers. These are the natural or environmental conditions that act as a barrier in communication in sending the message from sender to receiver. Examples. Number 1. People talking too loud. Number 2. Noise from a construction site. Number 3. Loud sound of a karaoke. Number 4. Blaring of jeepney horns. Second, psychological barriers. These are called as mental barriers. These refer to social and personal issues of a speaker towards communicating with others. Examples. Number 1, trauma. Number 2, shyness or lack of confidence. Number 3, depression. And number 4, fear or stage fright. Third, cultural barriers pertain to communication problems encountered by people regarding their intrinsic values, beliefs, and traditions in conflict with others. People's culture affects the way they communicate and relate to others. Examples. 1. Different beliefs. Number 2. Traditions and costumes. Number 3. Manners of dressing. And number 4, speaking. Fourth, we have the linguistic barriers. Pertain to conflicts with regard to language and word meanings. Because words carry denotative and connotative meanings, they can sometimes cause confusion and misunderstanding. Meaning of words and symbols also vary depending on culture. Examples. Number 1, the difference in language. Number 2, accent and dialect. Number 3, use of jargon and slang. Number 4, speech defects or language impairments. Verderber gives a similar idea of barrier when he classifies noise into three kinds: external, internal, and semantic noise. External noises are the sight, sound, and other stimuli that draw people's attention away from intended meaning. Examples: number 1, noise from vehicles. Number 2, singing at the neighborhood. Number 3, visual aids in front of the classroom. Number 4, the dog barking. And number 5, the sound of airplane. Internal noises are the thoughts and feelings that interfere with meaning. Examples: number 1, confrontation with a friend. Number 2, fear of speaking in front of the class. Number 3, racial prejudice. Semantic noises are the alternate meanings aroused by a speaker's symbols. This idea means that a word may have another meaning in the minds of the students. This is affected by the language in which they grew and the culture in which they are exposed. Examples: number 1, incorrect grammar. Number 2, using excessive technical jargon. Number 3, using idiomatic expressions. This time, let us have a short activity to assess if you really understand today's discussion. You will be given 5 seconds to choose the correct answer. Number 1, what influenced the interpretation of conversation to effective communication? Letter A, environment. Letter B, language. Letter C, noise. Or letter D, technological gadgets. The correct answer is letter C. Number 2, when is the communication process complete? Letter A, when the message enters the channel of communication. Letter B, when the receiver understands the message and feedback. Letter C, when the sender transmits message to the receiver. Or letter D, when the sender transmits the message successfully. The correct answer is letter B. Number 3, which of the following must be avoided in communication breakdown? Letter A, ambiguity. Letter B, focused attention. Letter C, personal interpretation. Or letter D, both A and B. The correct answer is letter D. Number 4, which barrier includes the mental conditions of the listener? Letter A, cultural barrier. Letter B, linguistic barrier. Letter C, physical barrier. Or letter D, psychological barrier. The correct answer is letter D. Number 5, which barrier includes the hearing or sight problem of the listener? Letter A, cultural barrier. Letter B, linguistic barrier. Letter C, physical barrier. Or letter D, both A and C. The correct answer is letter B. Well done, senior high learners! Now you know that there are different elements of barriers in communication around us, which eventually causes communication breakdown. At times, it is inevitable, but as a sensible speaker or sender of the message, we could avoid this. But how are you going to do it? There are 5 ways to avoid communication breakdown according to the article of Ronnie Peterson. Number 1, have clarity of thought before speaking. Arrange your thoughts before verbalizing them. This can help you communicate much more clearly and succinctly. It is a better idea to say something like, "I've got a few ideas here. Let me go through them one at a time. We can treat each other on its own merit." Number 2, learn to listen. As simple as it sounds, you'll be surprised how many people out there don't know how to listen well. Not understanding those who you are trying to communicate with will lead to a conversation fraught with misunderstandings. Don't be afraid to ask them to repeat or explain further in polite manner once you don't understand the point. Number 3, take care of your body language and tone. Keep your emotions in check. Try to maintain eye contact and adopt a relaxed tone when conversing with others. Number 4, build up your confidence by asking for feedback and observing others. Focus on improving your skills by practicing in front of those you may feel more comfortable with. You can also ask those whose advice you value to give you feedback and critique. Number 5, communicate face-to-face on the important issues. Having that face-to-face dialogue means you can convey your point more clearly with your body language as well as your tone of voice. A smooth and successful communication transaction may result if you follow the strategies to avoid communication breakdown. Keeper Andy also suggested to keep focused, speak intelligibly, listen with ears and eyes, minimize distractions, be specific, do not jump to conclusions, and may use these following expressions. There is so much in store for you. Continue reading and answering your modules, and see you again in our next session. And that's the end of today's episode of Lantaw Compre TV School on Air. This is your teacher, Rizal M. Britannia, saying, be mindful not to be the cause of the barrier for others to communicate, but be the catalyst to bridge between the gap of confusions, misunderstandings, and miscommunications. To have a healthy and a strong bond among everyone, keep the line open, connect or reconnect, and keep on communicating.